When it finally happened, when finally the information dump went across the entire world, the sudden revelations of the old and new technology, well, it changed things. Everyone found out that old tech allows pure health through things like frequency and different energies, bring in free and abundant energy along with transportation, and new technology allows for things like regeneration and adaptation, which means that, well, anyone can remain human and be in their own prime form for, well, ever. And because of this, people had time to look into how to get off planet and they finally began to reach out. As humanity reached out and tried to bring commerce to many of the different species out there was issues, of course. There was more fighting on Earth than other planets. Humans got more aggression going on, more passion, more gluttony, more desire and avarice than they had before, and they began to tear each other apart before they could actually reach all the way to other species. Yet, as other species were in fact reached and communication was established, hearing all this, all the other species, when they meet humans, always expect more. Humans, as they see them, are, simply put, boring. They have no special colors, no special appendages, no anything like that. No tails, no wings, no horns, no anything of this, no claws. All they have is the very tone muscles. This is due to the fact that they're obsessed with the little things, like making their bodies better and also learning about other cultures. And, of course, as everyone would find out, very slowly enjoying their meals as though they're savoring it, as though it's their last meal ever. On the surface, though, humans are just so damn boring. History of the humans after the revelations. Everybody knew of the entire violence, entire continents torn themselves apart with politicians and warlords slaughtering millions, leaving what was just one desert, almost a continent of deserts. They strike each other with technology that they barely comprehended at that time. Cultures insisting on purging each other, ripped across entire peninsulas, and it was just horrific. Utilizing anti-gravitics, antimatter, zero point, quantum fields, and all this other energy created devastating weapons. Directed energy weapons reshaped 20% of the human's cradle world. Even war between planets in their home system before reaching out to the other species out there was fairly common, and wars that would cost everyone more than they even realized at first. Eventually, humanity pretty much just got it out of their systems, and humans are now calm, very calm. They do not walk in like other species with grand declarations of superiority, even when they enter a drinking establishment. They take pride in their professionalism, how clean their uniforms are, and getting a job done extremely well. This is what they go for. And this is why usually you will only see a human inside a station or on another planet inside some sort of exosuit. This makes them all look exactly the same, and they move robotically. They speak in a tone that is very, very professional. They're an extremely boring species. That is, until you strip off the outer layer, of course. And in some cases, this is literal. Once inside one of the human ships, which is very practical, especially on the outside, everything is set up with a purpose. Yet once you get outside the cargo area, it is very, very comfortable. Many started to wonder why this was until humanity would simply say, if you see a spacer, that's not a ship, that's their residence. And that's when the outer layer usually comes off. As it turns out, humans don't like wearing a lot of clothing anymore, at least not much of it. Once they've actually got their transport out into space on those long journeys that take hours, days, weeks, sometimes even months to get from point A to point B, humans seem to not care about the protocol or being professional. Humans simply research and exercise a lot. It's normal to see both actually performed at once whenever you're traveling inside a human ships. There's several examples of passengers reporting instances of humans showing off their young looking, firm, tight, and surprisingly smooth bodies. Not needing to worry about degradation due to time, it seemed as though all humans really wanted to do every once in a while was go into a healing pod for any type of physical issue if they did something, as they say, overtraining. Vanity is clearly apparent across all these humans, but it's strange. They won't expose this anywhere else, but only on their ship. But this vanity is not just what they focus on. There are other things. But there are two specific examples that show how humanity, once out of their shell, so to speak, become very not boring. Sally was transporting 5 adenoids from a work site back to their homeworld. As she was delivering cargo from that work site to their homeworld, having some extra passengers, that's just an extra payday as far as she was concerned. As they leave orbit, they look and they see her mechanical precision, using the AIs to make sure everything is done perfect. Once they jump to FTL, it's on autopilot, and she only has to check in every so many hours. This 19 human days before they would even have to start deceleration, this is when things got interesting. Sally could be seen walking around the ship in hardly any fabric at all. In many times, this fabric was very smooth, very delicate to the touch, and this is all she would walk around in. Many of the adenoids would see her glistening skin after an intense cardio session as she was walking down the walls. She would do like all the other humans and work out 2 to 3 times a day, which meant her muscles were extremely dense too. Yet to look at her, you wouldn't think how strong she was. She was also very thin. She seemed very delicate, very trimmed. Yet one would simply have to look to her midsection to notice the muscles pushing up against her dermal layer. The adenoids knows this for sure. Being in similar structure to humans, a bit smaller than the average human for sure, but still taller than Sally, but only by about 7 or 8 centimeters. During meals, Sally hardly dressed up as well, even though she said she enjoys cooking. It's as though she was trying to show off without showing off, and it was clear. The aquatic adenoids kept flapping their gills at the sight of this, trying to make sure she didn't notice, but this was something that would happen whenever they were interested, especially since most humans use a fixed light beam to permanently remove all the hair from their body, and maybe a little for their heads if they really want to. The adenoids came enamored at the sight as they themselves were completely hairless. Before the trip was over, the 5 adenoid males were a lot worse for wear, as many of them almost had to crawl off of the ship as all the crates were being taken off. They had gotten a taste of humans' unprofessional side, which seemed to not have an off switch at all. At least, not until they're about to land. And that is when the veneer returns and cannot be broken as long as they want it there. Sally was once again like a robot. In fact, you couldn't even tell that it was a female human unless you looked close and saw how they walked. And this was something that the adenoids always looked for now. On another human transport, the human Marv gave a ride to a group of female tonsils that had gotten stranded out when their ship decided to not work and they had no idea how to fix it, nor did they have the purchasing ability to have it fixed in time. This slightly reptilian species was also a bit short compared to humans. and their nearly pastel skin. One was pink, one was like a sky light blue, another one was a pastel green, and the other was a bright yellow. All of them stood out a lot as they loaded on to the dark bay of Marv's ship. When they first got on, many of them were worried about what was going to happen on a human vessel. They were worried even more as their 3 fingers and 3 toes had a bit of difficulty gripping onto the metal plating of the human ship, at least at first. They did learn eventually how to deal with it. Yet they worried that the entire ship was going to be the same cold, utilitarian space. They had heard rumors of the first human ships that had shown up, and these were warships. Everything was utilitarian, and they didn't feel like sleeping in these tiny, tiny little cubby holes, curled up 2 and 3 in one hole. Perhaps this is all they would have. Maybe all they would have is a whole bunch of food that's coming out of a wrapper, some out of a tube, all of it tasting like nothing, or maybe a dirty tail or something like that. They cringed at the idea, but they still had to get home. So they followed Marv. Eventually, he motioned at them to hurry up. He was about to close the cargo bay, and usually the cargo bay is not pressurized in flight. This saves them time, saves them trouble, and it saves them energy. As they went into the rest of the ship, they were astounded, amazed at the comfort outside the cargo hold. They would run over to the couches and the chairs, jump on them, and they saw it was so soft. One of them even jumping on, thinking it was a bed, and she just curled up and just wanted to fall asleep. The first time she'd be able to sleep in several solar rotations. Oh, it felt so good. But that was not the surprise. No. The fact that before they even realized it, the ship was taking off. They barely felt it, but Marv insisted that they all strap in just in case, because as he said, you never know what's going to happen. And once they were actually in FTL, they all wanted to run back to the soft pillows. However, Marv said, nope, we got something else in mind. That is when he started peeling off his suit. That large robotic suit that was shaped exactly like the humans, but was completely utilitarian. Now they saw him for who he was. Inside his suit, all he wore was this strange belt, and it seemed like a single cloth down the front. They were completely confused at this. Why would the human be like this inside the suit? Is this so in case one of the Gorkin decide to chomp in, which is their version of a dragon, it'd be crunchy on the outside and squishy on the inside? This actually played into what happened next, as they were brought into the dining room and machines were sitting there producing food. This was cut up in front of them and cooked, and so much food. The hydroponics bay on the ship was actually growing fresh vegetables, fresh fruit right there. They couldn't believe it. There was so much. They just gorged themselves, and eventually they wanted to just fall asleep. But Marv said, no. You have to get a full tour before you pass out. Besides, the last place we're going is the billets, and I'll make sure you guys are set up. They were astounded. These 4 tonsils were just amazed at what was there. Were they going to be in the lap of luxury as they traveled back after having so many problems? A few of them wanted to find some place to wash off. Their slightly scaled skin was starting to get dry, and they're going to have to shed soon. Yet they found something more interesting than just a shower. They found that the bathrooms were full bathrooms, tub, shower, sink, even a place where they could relieve themselves. They were amazed at how many there actually were. They asked Marv, why so many? He simply said, hey, when you gotta go, and you don't want to have to run. They all looked at him kind of sideways for this, but this was not the biggest surprise. They were amazed to find a low-G pool in the ship, something Marv took special pride in, but he also showed them something that he called a jacuzzi. This was even more interesting than they could even believe. Marv told them to make sure that they hose themselves off on the shower on the side before they get in the jacuzzi, which they all enjoyed very much. Marv got in for a little while, enjoyed the hot water, but then he went to get out before the rest. This is when they all finally looked at him close. Marv, just like all the other humans, exercised constantly, and as soon as he was done with his time in the jacuzzi, he went straight back into the workout area. And when he did, he actually asked the tonsils to come around as he was working out. He was asking them constant questions about their culture. The female tonsils just answered his questions. However, their eyes kept their gaze moving somewhere else every time it seemed like Marv got up. After the females got some good long rest, they wanted to enjoy the ship once again. They found Marv working out again, and then they were able to work out with him, even though it wasn't really their forte. He talked them through everything as an instructor, making sure they did everything right to make sure they didn't hurt themselves. And then, of course, afterwards, it was back to the jacuzzi. A hot jacuzzi, a few intoxicating beverages, and, of course, old-fashioned curiosity from the tonsils revealed that men also tend to revert back to their base instincts once they choose to, once they reveal themselves, once they break out of their shells. After the trip, the group wondered if they would charter another trip on Marv's ship, maybe next time back on another vacation. Because of the rumors that kept going around, it became a semi-common practice, or more like an open secret, to demand transport on human ships. All their species would attempt to enter one of the human sectors, and they were always denied this. They knew that humans would allow them to travel on the ships, but it seemed as though human territory was completely off limits, as humans are also very, very territorial. Whenever a human actually entered its own territory, they were scanned multiple times to make sure nobody was coming in with something they weren't supposed to. Still, amongst all this, the highest request of transport was always with these professional and boring humans. They would always get a strange look from whichever species would answer, and they would always say the same thing. Oh, humans are boring. That is, until they're not. Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. Thank you for joining me today on part 1 of most likely 2 of this story. And before I go, I need to say that today's winner is Chris Dixon. And I also need to send out some giant thank yous to the supporters of the channel, and they are Brian Kemp, Sir, MTF Guard, Guardian Sage, Steve Uwig, Douglas Scarborough, Erica Gem, SS Demon, Prozac and Pancakes, and Joseph Blosh. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntext.
Ejecting!